Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open the blueprint for empire building. I mean, a real ancient formula. One forged in chaos that ended up shaping one of the world's most enduring civilizations.
So think about it. How do you turn centuries of complete chaos into a unified empire that can actually stand the test of time? It's a massive question, right? Well, we're going to see how two of China's most famous dynasties, the Qin and the Han, came up with a powerful two-part answer. It's like one provided the brutal force, and the other, well, they had the brilliant follow-through.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off way back in the 3rd century BCE. It's called the Warring States period, and trust me, it was every bit as chaotic as it sounds. Just constant conflict. But then, out of all that mess, the state of Qin emerges with a plan. And this plan was as ruthless as it was, frankly, effective.
Okay, so what was this plan? It was basically a three-step process. First up, pure, unrelenting military conquest. The Qin army just rolled over everyone. But the real game changer, the truly revolutionary part, was step 2. They standardized everything. I mean, think about it. Suddenly, across this huge, sprawling land, everyone's using the same money, the same weights and measures, even the same written language. This wasn't just for efficiency, It was about wiping out all those old regional identities and creating one single, unified Qin identity. And who was in charge of all this? One guy, the first emperor. All power flowed to him.
Yeah, this quote really nails the Qin's whole vibe. Their philosophy was called legalism, and it was intense. The idea was that order isn't something you ask for, it's something you impose. Unity isn't a goal you work towards, it's a command you follow, no questions asked. And you know what? This super strict top-down approach, it worked. For a little while anyway. It unified China for sure. But here's the problem. When you rule by fear, you breed resentment. It's like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. It looks powerful, but man, is it fragile.
So, you can probably guess what happened next. The Qin unified China, they laid out this blueprint, and then the whole thing collapsed in just 15 years. Poof! The foundation was there, but it was seriously flawed. So when the next dynasty, the Han, came along, they didn't just bulldoze the whole thing. Nope. They looked at that flawed foundation, saw the potential, and decided to basically re-engineer it to last.
And this chart really lays out the difference perfectly. Think of it like this. The Han kept the Qin's hardware, the idea of a big, unified state. But they installed a completely new operating system. They swapped out brute force for careful consolidation. They got rid of that super strict, unforgiving legalist philosophy and brought in something way more balanced and pragmatic. And the result? Well, a 15-year failed experiment turned into a 400-year golden age. That's a pretty good upgrade.
So now we get to the Han dynasty. They've inherited this massive, unified empire, which sounds great, but it comes with some huge challenges. I mean, how on earth do you defend thousands of miles of border? How do you actually manage a state this big? And maybe most importantly, how do you make sure it's not just surviving, but actually thriving?
Well, they came up with the answers, and their solutions were these 3 absolutely monumental innovations. And we're not just talking about individual projects here. These were the interconnected pillars that were going to hold up the entire empire for centuries.
Pillar number 1, defense. They had this constant threat from nomadic groups up north. Their solution? The Great Wall. And listen, the wall was so much more than just a pile of rocks. It was a massive statement. It basically drew a line in the sand, saying this is our empire. But it was also a gateway. It let the Han control who came in and out, and more importantly, control all that valuable trade.
Okay, pillar number 2 was about management, and this was a total revolution in how you run a country. See, before the Han, power was all about who your dad was. It was all hereditary. The Han said, nope, we're changing that. They created a professional class of government workers, a bureaucracy. To get a job, it didn't matter what your family name was. What mattered was your education, how skilled you were. This new civil service, based on merit, became this incredible engine that ran the whole empire. And it made sure people were loyal to the central government, not some local big shot.
And that brings us to Pillar 3, expansion and prosperity. You've heard of it, right? The legendary Silk Road. Now, it wasn't just one road. It was this huge, sprawling network of trade routes that connected China all the way to the west, to the Roman Empire. It was this incredible channel for goods, think silk going west, and gold, glass, and all sorts of new ideas coming back east. This network just flooded the Han dynasty with wealth and projected its power and culture across the entire known world. A true game changer.
So here's the really brilliant part. You have to see how these 3 pillars worked together. They weren't separate projects. The Great Wall provided the security. That security allowed the bureaucracy to run things smoothly.
And that stability is what allowed something like the Silk Road to even exist, let alone flourish. It was a perfectly interconnected system, a formula for an empire that could actually last. And you know what? The echoes of that formula, we can still feel them today.
When you boil it all down, it's really this simple. The Qin, they built the foundation. They did the brutal, messy, but necessary work. But it was the Han who came in, looked at that rough foundation, and built the magnificent, lasting structure on top of it. They created a model of an empire that would go on to shape China for the next 2,000 years.
So that leaves us with a pretty interesting question for today, doesn't it? What are the Great Walls and the Silk Roads of our modern world? What kinds of systems do nations build now to defend themselves, to manage their affairs, and to expand their influence? The technology is obviously a world away, but that fundamental challenge, how do you build something that truly lasts, that challenge is exactly the same.